St. Alexander Nevsky Lavra or St. Alexander Nevsky Monastery was founded by Peter I of Russia in 1710 at the eastern end of the Nevsky Prospect in St. Petersburg, supposing that that was the site of the Lavra battle in 1240 when Alexander Nevsky, a prince, defeated the Swedes. However, the battle actually took place about 19 kilometers away from that site. On April 5, 1713, in St. Petersburg, in the presence of Peter I, the wooden Church of the Annunciation was consecrated. This day is considered the official founding date of the Alexander Nevsky Lavra. The relics of St. Alexander Nevsky were solemnly transferred from Vladimir to the new capital of Russia September 12, 1724 by decree of Peter the Great. Nevsky became patron of the newly founded Russian capital. However, the massive silver sarcophagus of St. Alexander Nevsky was relocated during Soviet times to the State Hermitage Museum where it remains, without the relics, today. In 1797, the monastery was raised to the rank of Lavra, making it only the third Lavra in the Russian Orthodox Church that had that designation bestowed upon it, following only the Kiev Monastery of the Caves and the Trinity Monastery of St. Sergius. The monastery grounds contain two Baroque churches, designed by father and son Trezini and built from 1717 to 1722 and 1742 to 1750, respectively, a majestic neoclassical cathedral, built in 1778 to 1790 to a design by Ivan Starov and consecrated to the Holy Trinity, and numerous structures of lesser importance. It also contains the Lazarev and Tikhvine cemeteries, where ornate tombs of Leonhard Euler, Mikhail Lomonosov, Alexander Savarov, Nikolai Karamzin, Modest Mussorgsky, Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Karl Ivanovich Rossi, Prince Garzvan Chavkavadze, a Georgian aristocrat, Sergei Witt and other famous Russians are preserved. During the Revolution, People's Commissar of Social Welfare Altai wanted to convert the monastery into a sanctuary for war invalids. She sent a group of sailors January 19, 1918, who were met by an angry crowd of worshippers, and after some fighting a priest was shot and killed. Today Alexander Nevsky Lavra sits on Alexander Nevsky Square, where shoppers can buy bread baked by the monks. Visitors may also visit the cathedral and cemeteries for a small admission fee. While many of the grave sites are situated behind large concrete walls, especially those of famous Russians, many can be seen by passers-by while strolling down Abukovskoye Burny Street.
The Altai Mountains are a mountain range in Central and East Asia, where Russia, China, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan come together, and are where the rivers Irtysh and Ob have their headwaters. The Altai Mountains are home to a diverse fauna, because of its different habitats, like steppes, northern taigas and alpine vegetation. Deer are represented by 5 species: Altai wapiti, moose, forest reindeer, Siberian musk deer and Siberian roe deer. Moose and reindeer, however, are restricted to the northern parts of the mountain range. The wild boar is found in the lower foothills and surrounding lowlands. Until recently, the Mongolian gazelle was found in the Russian Altai Mountains, more specifically in the Chuya River steppe close to the Mongolian border. Large predators are represented by snow leopards, wolves, lynx, and brown bears, in the northern parts also by the wolverine. The Altai Mountains have retained a remarkably stable climate, changing little since the last ice age. In addition, the mix of mammals has remained largely the same, with a few exceptions such as extinct mammoths, making it one of the few places on Earth to retain an Ice Age fauna. The Altai Mountains were home to the Denisovan branch of hominids who were contemporaries of Neanderthals and of Homo sapiens, modern humans, descended from hominids who reached Asia earlier than modern humans. The same cave has uncovered Neanderthal bones, and tools made by Homo sapiens, making it the only known locale in the world where all 3 hominids are known to have lived. The Altai Mountains have been identified as being the point of origin of a cultural enigma termed the Saviour phenomenon, which arose during the Bronze Age around the start of the 2nd millennium BC and led to a rapid and massive migration of peoples from the region into distant parts of Europe and Asia. A vast area of 16,178 square kilometers, Altai and Katan Natural Reserves, Lake Telitsko, Mount Beluga, and the Yukok Plateau comprise a natural UNESCO World Heritage Site entitled Golden Mountains of Altai. As stated in the UNESCO description of the site, the region represents the most complete sequence of altitudinal vegetation zones in central Siberia, from steppe, forest steppe, mixed forest, subalpine vegetation to alpine vegetation. While making its decision, UNESCO also cited Russian Altai's importance for preservation of the globally endangered mammals, such as snow leopard and the Altai argali.
Bolgar was intermittently capital of Volga, Bulgaria from the 8th to the 15th centuries, along with Bilyar and Nersuvor. It was situated on the bank of the Volga River, about 30 kilometers downstream from its confluence with the Kama River, and some 130 kilometers from modern Kazan in what is now Spassky district. West of it lies a small modern town, since 1991 known as Bolgar. The UNESCO World Heritage Committee declared ancient Bolgar Hill Fort as a World Heritage Site in 2014. The city is supposed to have been the capital of Volga, Bulgaria from as early as the 8th century. Regular Russian incursions along the Volga and internecine fights forced the Volga Bulgar kings to intermittently move their capital to Bilyar. After a destruction of Bilyar during the Mongol invasion, the older capital became a center of a separate province, or duchy, within the Golden Horde. During the period of Mongol domination, Bolgar acquired immense wealth, many imposing buildings, and grew tenfold in size. The Tokhtamysh Timur War saw a marked decline in its fortunes. It was sacked by Bulak Timur in 1361, endangered by Timur, looted by Russian pirates, and destroyed in 1431 by Vasily the Blind of Muscovy. As a Muslim religious center, Bolgar persevered until the mid-16th century, when the Khanate of Kazan was conquered by the Russian Tsar Ivan IV, and incorporated into the Russian state. During the Tsarist rule, the site of the ancient town was settled by Russian commoners. Tsar Peter the Great issued a special ukaz to preserve the surviving ruins, which was probably a first Russian law aimed at preserving historical heritage. The Tatars refer to the medieval capital of Volga, Bulgaria as Shari Bolgar, that is, the city of Bolgar. The town is part of their cultural heritage, because Volga, Bulgaria is viewed by many Tatars as a predecessor state of the Khanate of Kazan, which in turn has cultural links to today's Russian Republic of Tatarstan. Today, the capital of Tatarstan is Kazan, but many Tatars consider Bolgar to be their ancient and religious capital, and to allow a glimpse of Muslim Bulgar life before the Mongol invasion of Volga, Bulgaria.
The Greater Church of Christ's Ascension is one of the largest parish churches in downtown Moscow. It is a major landmark of Bolshaya Nikitskaya Street and Nikitskaya Voroda Square. It is named Greater to prevent confusion with a nearby church of the same name. The church was commissioned by Prince Potemkin, the owner of a neighboring Meswaj, shortly before his death. The yellow-colored neoclassical building was erected between 1798 and 1816. The name of the architect is not known for certain. It has been attributed either to Mav Kazakov, who built numerous Moscow churches in the reign of Catherine the Great, or Ivan Starov, who frequently worked for Potemkin. The edifice was overhauled to Osipov's designs after the 1812 fire of Moscow. It stood unfinished for several decades and was not completed, under Afanasy Grigorov's supervision, until 1848. The church holds historical significance for several reasons. It was in this church that Alexander Pushkin married Natalia Goncheva, a fact commemorated by their fountain statues on Nikitsky Vorota Square. It was also there that Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow held his last service. This is commemorated by a side chapel dedicated in his name. The church was closed during the Soviet period, between 1931 and 1990. A 17th-century tent-like belfry, the sole remnant of an earlier church on the site, was demolished in 1937 and replaced by a statue of Alexei Tolstoy, the Red Count. The current belfry, freely based on Kazakov's designs and similar in style to the main church building, is of recent construction. There is a chapel of ease on Arbat Square.
The Church of the Saviour on Spilled Blood is one of the main sites of St. Petersburg, Russia. This church was built on the site where Emperor Alexander II was fatally wounded by political nihilists in March 1881. The church was built between 1883 and 1907. The construction was funded by the imperial family. Architecturally, the cathedral differs from St. Petersburg's other structures. The city's architecture is predominantly Baroque and neoclassical, but the Saviour on Blood harks back to medieval Russian architecture in the spirit of Romantic nationalism. It intentionally resembles the 17th-century Yaroslavl churches and the celebrated St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. The church contains over 7,500 square meters of mosaics, according to its restorers, more than any other church in the world. This record may be surpassed by the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, which houses 7,700 square meters of mosaics. The interior was designed by some of the most celebrated Russian artists of the day, including Viktor Vanetsov, Mikhail Nesterov and Mikhail Rubel, but the church's chief architect, Alfred Alexandrovich Parland, was relatively little known, born in St. Petersburg in 1842 in a Baltic German Lutheran family. Perhaps not surprisingly, the church's construction ran well over budget, having been estimated at 3.6 million rubles but ending up costing over 4.6 million. The walls and ceilings inside the church are completely covered in intricately detailed mosaics, the main pictures being biblical scenes or figures, but with very fine pattern borders setting off each picture. In the aftermath of the Russian Revolution, the church was ransacked and looted, badly damaging its interior. The Soviet government closed the church in 1932. In July 1970, management of the church passed to St. Isaac's Cathedral and it was used as a museum. The proceeds from the cathedral funded the restoration of the church. It was reopened in August 1997, after 27 years of restoration, but has not been reconsecrated and does not function as a full-time place of worship. The Church of the Saviour on Blood is a museum of mosaics. In the pre-revolution period it was not used as a public place of worship. The church was dedicated to the memory of the assassinated Tsar and only panic days took place. The church is now one of the main tourist attractions in St. Petersburg.
The Curonian Spit is a 98 kilometers long, thin, curved sand dune spit that separates the Curonian Lagoon from the Baltic Sea coast. Its southern portion lies within Kaliningrad Oblast, Russia, and its northern within southwestern Lithuania. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site shared by the two countries. The Curonian Spit stretches from the Sambian Peninsula on the south to its northern tip next to a narrow strait, across which is the port city of Klaipėda on the mainland of Lithuania. The northern 52 kilometers long stretch of the Curonian Spit Peninsula belongs to Lithuania, while the rest is part of the Kaliningrad Oblast, Russia. The width of the spit varies from a minimum of 400 meters in Russia to a maximum of 3,800 meters in Lithuania. The Curonian Spit is home to the highest moving sand dunes in Europe. Their average height is 35 meters, but some attain a height of 60 meters. Several ecological communities are present on and near the spit, from its outer beaches to dune ridges, wetlands, meadows, and forests. Its location on the East Atlantic Flyway means it is frequently visited by migratory waterfowl. Between 10 and 20 million birds fly over the feature during spring and fall migrations, and many pause to rest or breed there. The largest town on the spit is Nida in Lithuania, a popular holiday resort, mostly frequented by Lithuanian and German tourists. The northern shoreline of Curonian Spit is the site of beaches for tourists. Parnidis sand dune drifted by harsh winds is rising up to 52 meters above sea level. The interpretation of the name of Parnidos dune, local residents believe that the name comes from the phrase meaning passed across Nida, because this wind-blown dune has several times passed through the village of Nida. Scientists estimated that each person climbing or descending on this steep dune slopes moved several tons of sand, so hikers are only allowed to climb in designated paths. There is a granite sundial, built on Parnidis dune accurately showing the time. The sundial is a 13.8 meters high stone pillar weighing 36 tons. Right next to it there are small steps covered with granite slabs, carved with hour and half-an-hour notches, as well as one notch for each month, an additional 4 notches for solstices and equinoxes. From the astronomical point of view, Parnidos dune is an ideal and unique place for the sundial in Lithuania.
Derbent is a city in the Republic of Dagestan, Russia, located on the Caspian Sea, north of the Azerbaijani border. Derbent occupies the narrow gateway between the Caspian Sea and the Caucasus Mountains, connecting the Eurasian steppes to the north and the Iranian plateau to the south. Derbent claims to be the oldest city in Russia with historical documentation dating to the 8th century BCE. Due to its strategic location, over the course of history, the city changed ownership many times, particularly among the Persian, Arab, Mongol, Timurid, Shirvan and Iranian kingdoms. In the 19th century, the city passed from Iranian into Russian hands by the 1813 Treaty of Gulistan. The modern city is built near the western shores of the Caspian Sea, south of the Rubaz River, on the slopes of the Tabasaran Mountains, part of the bigger Caucasus Range. To the south lies the seaward extremity of the Caucasian Wall, otherwise known as Alexander's Wall, blocking the narrow pass of the Iron Gate or Caspian Gates. When intact, the wall had a height of 9 meters and a thickness of about 3 meters and, with its iron gates and numerous watchtowers, defended Persia's frontier. Derbent resembles a huge museum and has magnificent mountains and shore nearby, and therefore possesses much touristic potential, further increased by UNESCO's classification of the citadel, ancient city and fortress as a World Heritage Site in 2003. However, instability in the region has retarded development. The current fortification and walls were built by the Persian Sasanian Empire as a defensive structure against hostile nomadic people in the north, and continuously repaired or improved by later Arab, Mongol, Timurid, Shirvan and Iranian kingdoms until the early course of the 19th century, as long as its military function lasted. A large portion of the walls and several watchtowers still remain in reasonable shape. The walls, reaching to the sea, date from the 6th century, Sassanid dynasty period. The city has a well-preserved citadel, Narankala, enclosing an area of 4.5 hectares, enclosed by strong walls. Historical attractions include the baths, the cisterns, the old cemeteries, the caravanserai, the 18th century Khan's mausoleum, as well as several mosques. The oldest mosque is the Juma Mosque, built over a 6th century Christian basilica. It has a 15th century madrasa. Other shrines include the 17th century Kurhir Mosque, the Bala Mosque and the 18th century Chirtbi Mosque.
The Ferapontov Convent, in the Volga, the region of Russia, is considered one of the purest examples of Russian medieval art, a reason given by UNESCO for its inscription on the World Heritage List. The monastery was founded by Saint Ferapont in 1398 in the inhospitable Russian north, to the east from the Kirillo-Belozersk Monastery, named after his fellow monk, Saint Kirill of Belozero. The fame of the monastery started to spread under Kirill's disciple, Saint Martinian, who was to become a Father Superior of the Troitsk Sergiev Lavra in 1447. Even after Martinian's death, his monastery was protected and favored by members of Ivan III's family. The most ancient structure, the Cathedral of Nativity of the Virgin, 1490, was built in brick by the masters of Rostov. This edifice is the best preserved of three sister cathedrals erected in the 1490s in the Russian north. All the interior walls are covered with invaluable frescoes by the great medieval painter Dionysius. This is the last surviving Russian medieval church with fully painted walls. During the 1530s, they added the treasury, a refectory, and the unique Annunciation Church surmounted by a belfry. At that time the monastery enjoyed special privileges conferred upon it by Ivan the Terrible, and possessed some 60 villages in the vicinity. The Tsar himself frequently visited the monastery as a pilgrim. In the time of troubles, the monastery was ravaged by the Poles. During its recovery the last buildings, the tent-like church of St. Martinian, 1641, a two-tented Barbican church, 1650, and a bell tower, 1680, were added to the complex. The belfry clocks, 1638, are said to be the oldest in Russia. As the monastery gradually lost its religious importance, it was being turned into a place of exile for distinguished clerics, such as the Patriarch Nikon. It was abolished by Emperor Paul in 1798, reinstituted as a convent in 1904, closed by the Bolsheviks 20 years later, and turned into a museum in 1975. The museum constitutes a part of the Russky Sever, Russian North, National Park since 1991.
Gorky Central Park of Culture and Leisure is a central park in Moscow, named after Maxim Gorky. Gorky Park, located at Krymsky Val, and situated just across the Moskva River from Park Kultury metro station, opened in 1928. The park followed the plan of Konstantin Melnikov, a world-famous Soviet avant-garde and constructivist architect, and amalgamated the extensive gardens of the old Golitsyn Hospital and of the Neskutchny Palace, covering an area of 300 acres along the river. The history of the Neskutchny Garden can be traced back to 1753, when it emerged in the area between Kalishskaya Zastava and Trubetskoy Moskva Riverside Estate. The neighboring area to Neskutchny Garden, from Krymsky Val to Neskutchny Garden, received little attention right up until the 1920s. Initially it was covered with park gardens, meadows, and vegetable gardens belonging to the owners of neighboring estates. It formed a wasteland by the end of the 19th century, and served as a waste heap. The first all-Russian agricultural and handicraft industries exhibition opened in 1923 on the wasteland that had been cleared during the course of communist community. A resolution for the exhibition was passed on 19 October 1922, and the exhibition opened 1.5 years later on 19 May 1923. After bidding for the exhibition's layout plan, which proposed 4 arrangements: Sokol, Kadinskoye Pole, Petrovsko, Razumovsky Park and the river areas near Krymsky Bridge, preference was given to the last option. In 1932 the park was named after M.A. Gorky. Gorky Park has always reflected the spirit of its times and social values. At the end of the 20th century, concentration on sport, in the best tradition of the Soviet era, retreated in the face of the commercial post-perestroika mood. The time of amusement attractions, numerous small shashlik cafes, advertising banners and entrance fees had begun. Nevertheless, the park remained beloved by the people for its shadowed alleys. During the winter the footpaths flood over and freeze, which allows ice skating around the park. Over the years the rides became decrepit, and the park territory was swamped with cheap attractions and cafes. The new 21st century brought a new wind of change and the need to transform the park's concept.
The State Hermitage Museum is a museum of art and culture in St. Petersburg, Russia. The largest in the world, it was founded in 1764 when Empress Catherine the Great acquired an impressive collection of paintings from the Berlin merchant Johann Ernst Gotskowski. The museum celebrates the anniversary of its founding each year on 7th of December, St. Catherine's Day. It has been open to the public since 1852. Its collections, of which only a small part is on permanent display, comprise over 3 million items. The numismatic collection accounts for about 1/3 of them, including the largest collection of paintings in the world. The collections occupy a large complex of 6 historic buildings along Palace Embankment, including the Winter Palace, a former residence of Russian emperors. Apart from them, the Menshikov Palace, Museum of Porcelain, storage facility at Staraya Derevnya and the eastern wing of the General Staff Building are also part of the museum. The museum has several exhibition centers abroad. The Hermitage is a federal state property. Since July 1992, the director of the museum has been Mikhail Pyotrovsky. Of the 6 buildings in the main museum complex, 5, namely the Winter Palace, Small Hermitage, Old Hermitage, New Hermitage and Hermitage Theatre, are open to the public. The entrance ticket for foreign tourists costs more than the fee paid by citizens of Russia and Belarus. However, entrance is free of charge the first Thursday of every month for all visitors, and free daily for students and children. The museum is closed on Mondays. The entrance for individual visitors is located in the Winter Palace, accessible from the courtyard. Originally, the only building housing the collection was the Small Hermitage. Today, the Hermitage Museum encompasses many buildings on the Palace Embankment and its neighborhoods. Apart from the Small Hermitage, the museum now also includes the Old Hermitage, also called Large Hermitage, the New Hermitage, the Hermitage Theatre, and the Winter Palace, the former main residence of the Russian Tsars. In recent years, the Hermitage has expanded to the General Staff Building on the Palace Square facing the Winter Palace, and the Menshikov Palace.
Kaliningrad is the administrative center of Kaliningrad Oblast, a Russian exclave between Poland and Lithuania on the Baltic Sea. Kaliningrad has many museums. A few examples are the Immanuel Kant Museum on the Nevsky Island, the Regional Museum of History and Arts, which has parts of Königsberg Castle's Prussian Museum of Local Archaeological Findings, and the Kaliningrad Amber Museum, which is situated in the Dona Tower near the Rosgarten Gate. The city is also home to the Kaliningrad State Art Gallery, established in 1988, that is developing as a contemporary art museum. The Museum of the World's Oceans is located on the former research vessel Wityaz on the shore of the Perigel River. The museum displays the newest technologies on sea research and also shows the diversity of the flora and fauna of the world's oceans. The Kaliningrad Philharmonic Orchestra is accommodated in the former Catholic Church of the Holy Family of Königsberg, built in 1907. The church escaped major damage in World War II and was refurbished afterwards. The building, which has noted acoustics, functions as an organ hall since reopening in 1980. The Kaliningrad Regional Drama Theatre is located in the former Königsberg Schauspielhaus, which was opened in 1910. The building was rebuilt after the war using earlier plans for the theatre and opened in 1960. The colonnade in front of the entrance was modeled after the Bolshoi Theatre in Moscow. The regionally notable Kaliningrad Puppet Theatre has had its seat since 1975 in the Queen Louise Remembrance Church. Many German-era buildings in the historic city center have been preserved and even rebuilt, including the reconstruction of the Königsberg Synagogue. The new city center is concentrated around Victory Square. The Cathedral of Christ the Saviour, consecrated in 2005, is located on that square. Kaliningrad is a very green city with a large number of parks and areas with lots of trees and lawns. Parks range from tiny city squares to massive parks. Youth Recreation Park is one of the well-known and popular parks in the city. The Kaliningrad Zoo was opened as the Königsberg Zoo in 1896. The collection, which extends over 16.5 hectares, comprises 315 species with a total of 2,264 individual animals, as of 2005. The Kaliningrad Zoo is also an arboretum,